Dummy baddie in tight athletic wear sweats through an intense late-night workout, completely unaware of the eyes watching her from the second-floor window. Up in his room, her brother-in-law looks down at her, believing he knows the real reason she goes out to skip rope every single night. While she claims she is merely dieting, the gremlin finds this to be a poor excuse, noting that she continues this exhausting routine even after returning from a long run. As he watches her jump, he concludes that she simply cannot stand the loneliness of a long night by herself. Leaning against the window frame, our monkey is filled with a sense of longing as his mind drifts back to the day his military service ended. His older brother Si-jun had come to visit him at the base, bringing along a stunning woman and introducing her as his new sister-in-law. Hearing her friendly greeting and learning that she already knew so much about him made his heart race instantly, leading to the sudden realization that he had just met his absolute ideal woman. Unfortunately for him, his dream woman was already married to his own brother, leaving him to sigh in defeat. Back in the present, he watches her dry her face with a towel and wishes with a heavy sigh that he could be the one by her side. He can only watch in silence as she finishes her workout and walks back toward the house, leaving him wishing his brother was not his family. The next morning brings bright sunshine and the persistent ringing of a cell phone, waking the young man from his deep slumber. He groggily sits up in bed, rubbing his head and realizing he probably stayed up far too late, staring out the window like an idiot. Deciding that a quick shower is exactly what he needs to wake up, he lazily wanders down the stairs and heads straight for the bathroom. He carelessly swings the door open without bothering to knock, only to freeze in absolute horror upon seeing his sister-in-law standing there in her workout clothes. Both of them are completely paralyzed by the sudden intrusion, with him blundering out a panicked exclamation while she gasps in sheer shock. Realizing the gravity of the situation, she quickly slams the door shut, leaving him standing in the hallway to contemplate his dumb mistake. As he stands outside the closed door with his heart hammering against his chest, he wonders why she was even using this particular bathroom when she normally has her own private one in her bedroom. Despite his confusion and embarrassment, his silly mind cannot help but dwell on how incredible her gym physique looked, making it impossible for him to focus on anything else. A moment later, the door slowly creaks open to reveal his sister-in-law, now fully dressed in a casual top and a long floral skirt. Looking incredibly flustered, she sheepishly apologizes for the misunderstanding, explaining that she only used his bathroom because the boiler in her own room was currently broken. Seung frantically waves his hands to reassure his sister-in-law, insisting that he should be the one apologizing for barging in so carelessly. She smiles warmly and tells him that it is perfectly fine, suggesting that they should just forget about the whole incident since they are family now. Seung sheepishly scratches his ear, feeling a strange twinge of disappointment at the word family. She then announces that she will start preparing breakfast and promises to call him once the food is ready, prompting him to agree quietly. As he watches her walk away into the kitchen, the young man realizes that, as expected, he is nothing more than family to her. Soon after, she ties a pink apron around her waist and gets to work in the kitchen. Si-young sits down at the dining table with his older brother Si-jun to eat the breakfast she prepared. Looking down at the spread of eel, mushrooms, and vegetables, Si-young silently notes that they are eating an incredibly healthy meal for this early in the morning. His sister-in-law leans over the counter and voices her concern to Si-jun, stating that his body seems to be feeling quite weak lately and asking if he is doing all right. Si-jun immediately dismisses her worries and directs the attention to his younger brother, suggesting she look after Si-young instead, since his face has been looking much skinnier recently. Si-young is mildly annoyed by this, wondering why his brother is shifting the focus to him when he is perfectly healthy. When she proposes making a tonic for both of them to prepare for the upcoming summer, Si-jun flatly declines, claiming he is already healthy enough. He then points out that her eyes have become cloudy and her complexion seems off, asking if she wants him to send her to the hospital again. The sister-in-law freezes at his words, visibly hurt by the harsh suggestion. Si-young immediately recognizes that they are referring to the doctor, which is an incredibly sussy topic for his struggling sister-in-law. His brother tries to soften the blow by stating that he is just worried about her, reminding her that they can still live a perfectly good life, even without children, and pointing out that she is only stressing herself out. She looks down in silence before admitting that she has indeed been far too stressed about the whole matter, which Si-jun confirms, noting she has been too sensitive lately. Sitting between them, Si-young eats his food in silence, finding the heavy atmosphere incredibly uncomfortable. Having finished his meal, he stands up from the table, prompting his brother to ask if he is already done eating. Si-young confirms this, explaining that he needs to head out to the bookstore now. He heads to his room and changes into a dark button-up shirt, reflecting on how his sister-in-law is struggling to get a new family member due to his brother's lack of endurance training. After years of unsuccessful efforts, Seung's brother seems to have grown tired of the entire situation, leaving his poor sister-in-law to fret and worry all by herself. Seung soon arrives at his shop, named Seung's Bookstore, and settles in behind the front desk to read. A sudden chime of the entrance bell breaks the silence, and he looks up to deliver his standard welcoming greeting to the customer. He is pleasantly surprised to see his sister-in-law walking through the door, carrying a tiered lunchbox and cheerfully addressing him as the manager. Seung playfully begs her to stop calling him manager, thanking her for going out of her way to bring him food once again. She giggles and insists on the title since he is indeed the manager, announcing that she has brought him some homemade kimbap. She leans over the counter and asks if he likes kimbap, which immediately flusters the idiot as he tries to keep his eyes from wandering. He looks down at the beautifully arranged pieces of kimbap, which she humbly mentions she prepared all by herself. Our monkey boy genuinely praises her work, commenting on how delicious it looks, while she encourages him to hurry up and eat before it gets cold. Feeling a little guilty that she came all this way just to deliver a lunchbox, Seung scratches his head and remarks that this is a bit too much food for just one person. He then looks up at her and asks if she would like to join him and eat together if she is hungry, leaving his sister-in-law staring at him in surprise as her own heart begins to beat rapidly. Hearing Seung's warm invitation, his sister-in-law blushes slightly and agrees to eat a little bit of the food with him. The idiot happily digs in until there is only one single piece of kimbap left in the container, leaning back with a sigh of satisfaction as he declares himself completely full. His sister-in-law giggles at his dramatic display, teasingly pointing out that he barely ate anything and that his stomach is not even showing. Seung can only chuckle and joke that he should probably thank her for pointing out the obvious truth. As they clean up, she notices the lone remaining piece of kimbap in the container, picking it up with a fork and offering to feed it to him directly. Seung immediately panics like an idiot, waving his hands frantically and insisting that he is perfectly capable of eating on his own. She playfully ignores his protests, leaning in close and urging him to just hurry up and eat the final piece since it is only one bite. Unfortunately, her playful nature backfires when her sandal slips, causing her to lose her footing entirely. Seung gasps in sheer shock, lunging forward desperately to catch her before she hits the hard floor. The two of them crash down in a messy heap, with Seung groaning under her weight as they land heavily on the ground. Catching his breath, the young man feels a brief wave of relief that he managed to prevent a nasty fall. However, this relief immediately morphs into sheer terror when he realizes that his hand has landed directly on her hand. Both of them freeze in stunned silence, with Seung paralyzed by his own hands and his sister-in-law gasping in utter embarrassment. Panicking, Seung scrambles backward as if he has been shocked, desperately explaining that his only intention was to stop her from falling. He drops to his knees to apologize profusely, but his kind sister-in-law gently tells him there is absolutely no need to apologize, expressing her gratitude for his quick reflexes. She glances at the clock on the wall and realizes that it is already getting quite late, announcing that she needs to run some grocery errands for dinner and must head out first. Seung can only offer a sheepish farewell as she picks up her things to leave. Before walking out the door, she turns back with a smile and promises to make whatever he wants for lunch next time if he just lets her know. Left alone in the empty bookstore, Seung stands behind the counter and laments how disappointing it is to see her leave so soon, as his foolish heart wanted nothing more than to spend a little more time with her. Night eventually falls, and the moon rises high over the quiet neighborhood. Seung lies wide awake in his bed, staring blankly at the ceiling and finding it completely impossible to fall asleep. His hyperactive mind keeps replaying the day's events, including his sussy accidental morning intrusion in the bathroom and the highly awkward bookstore fall. Sighing deeply as his cheeks turn bright red, he reflects on how many chaotic things happened in a single day and how remarkably beautiful his sister-in-law looked. He clenches his fist in frustration, scolding himself that he has no business concerning himself with a married woman, yet he still cannot help but wish he could train her fat-burning cardio. Just as his thoughts start to wander a bit too far, a sudden mental image of his older brother, Sejun, asking him warmly how work is going pops into his head. Horrified by his own guilt, Seung forcefully slaps both sides of his face to wake himself up, loudly scolding himself for letting his mind drift into such foolish territory. He firmly concludes that no matter how perfectly she fits his ideal type, she remains his brother's devoted wife who genuinely cares for him as family, and he needs to start acting like a sensible person instead of a lovesick monkey. Realizing that his mind is spiraling completely out of control, Seung decides he desperately needs a cup of cold water to cool himself down before he loses his sanity like a total idiot. He quietly slips out of bed and heads down to the kitchen, pouring himself a refreshing drink in hopes of washing away his sussy thoughts. However, just as he gulps down the cold water, his ears catch a faint, rhythmic sigh echoing through the quiet house. He pauses in confusion, trying to identify the source of the strange proper noise, while remembering that his older brother is currently away on a business trip. Curiosity getting the better of this clueless dummy, Seong silently sneaks down the hallway toward the room where a warm glow of light leaks through a slightly open door. He gently nudges the door further open to peek inside, only for his eyes to widen in absolute shock at the scene unfolding before him. Through the narrow crack, he witnesses his sister-in-law on the bed, strengthening her hand grip to ease her deep tension and loneliness. The young man stands completely frozen, utterly transfixed by the sight as she continues her breathless self-strengthening, completely oblivious to her brother-in-law standing right outside her bedroom door. Standing by the cracked door, Seong is completely overwhelmed by the scene, feeling all the guilt that was haunting him just moments ago completely melt away as he continues to peek at his sister-in-law. This hopeless dummy gets so caught up in the moment that he desires to see even more exercise, his reaction making his internal conflict worse by the second. However, his reckless behavior catches up to him when he accidentally bumps his foot against the door, causing a sharp creaking sound to echo through the hallway. Seong freezes in absolute panic, realizing he has made a massive blunder. Inside the room, his sister-in-law immediately halts her hand grip strengthening, gasping in surprise and turning her head toward the door to see if someone is there. She quickly covers herself and pulls the door open to investigate the silent hallway. Fortunately for our idiot, he manages to scramble around the corner just in time, pressing himself against the wall while sweating profusely and realizing how incredibly close he came to getting into deep trouble. His sister-in-law peers into the dark, empty corridor, ultimately assuming she must have simply heard something wrong before heading back inside. Back in his own bed, the idiot lets out a frustrated sigh, thoroughly annoyed with himself as he wonders why on earth he keeps having these highly sussy thoughts about his brother's wife. Just as he tries to settle down, a sudden knock on his door startles him, and he sits straight up as he hears his sister-in-law calling out to him from the hallway. His overactive imagination immediately plays a wild, proper daydream of her walking in completely improper clothes and begging him for an endurance training, prompting him to shake his head frantically to clear the illusion. He clears his throat and tells her that he is indeed still awake, inviting her to come in. She slowly steps into the room, and Seong gathers his composure to ask what could possibly bring her to his bedroom at such a late hour. Looking at her face, his heart starts pounding as he wonders if his wild daydream is actually about to come true. However, she quickly dispels his silly hopes, explaining that she came to ask if he had happened to walk past her room earlier. She sheepishly admits that she had been tossing and turning in bed, and she was terribly worried that he might have witnessed her hand grip strengthening session. Realizing she is trying to verify if he caught her, our idiot quickly plays it cool, scratching his head and lying smoothly that he did not go downstairs at all today. She lets out a massive sigh of relief, thanking goodness before bidding him good night and preparing to leave. Seong watches her go, feeling a bit of a disappointment and wondering if she really came all this way just to ask that. But before closing the door, she turns back and asks if he has some free time tomorrow to accompany her to a yoga center inside the department store. Seong is a bit confused, but when she mentions she has a lecture to attend there anyway and suggests they go together, he readily agrees. She beams with joy, telling him she is looking forward to their drive tomorrow and playfully instructing him to wear nice clothes. After she leaves, Seong is left sitting on his bed with a racing heart, completely baffled by what she could possibly mean by wanting him to dress nicely. The following afternoon finds Seong back at his bookstore, anxiously checking his phone only to see that it is already past 3 o'clock. He notes that Yunhee is quite late, realizing he really should have picked up his sister-in-law by now. Knowing how exceptionally punctual she always is, he begins to worry, wondering if she might have gotten into some sort of accident on her way. As he paces around the store, desperately hoping nothing bad has happened, a bright voice suddenly calls out behind him, welcoming him as the president. Seong is so startled by the sudden greeting that he bumps right into the speaker, letting out a pained grunt as he collides with a blonde woman. She looks at him in complete surprise, asking why on earth he was just standing right there in the way. Seong holds his head in pain, groaning from the sudden collision with his blonde employee, Yunhee. He rubs his bruised forehead and complains about her being late, only for a completely baffled Yunhee to state that she is not late at all. Suddenly she gasps as she realizes she completely forgot to read his message from earlier that morning. Bowing down in a frantic apology, she wishes him good luck and quickly makes her escape, leaving the poor guy to deal with the painful bump on his head all by himself. Shortly after, Seong and his sister-in-law arrive at the department store, parking their car in the underground lot. She beams and thanks him sweetly for driving her, but her smile quickly fades into concern as she notices the prominent lump on his forehead and asks if he is all right. Seung can only offer an awkward, embarrassed laugh as he tries to downplay the injury. Determined to inspect the damage, his sister-in-law leans, insisting on taking a look to make sure it is nothing serious. This close proximity completely breaks Seung's focus, and he helplessly finds his eyes wandering to her hands, silently admiring how pretty she looks up close. Before he can compose himself, she gasps and abruptly pulls back, blushing deeply as she apologizes for touching him without his permission. The idiot scratches his head in embarrassment, assuring her that it is perfectly fine, but his brain completely short-circuits as he accidentally blurts out aloud that she is incredibly cute. Realizing his monumental blunder, Seung freezes in absolute horror while his sister-in-law stares at him in complete shock, stuttering to clarify what he just said. Desperately backpedaling to save himself, he frantically waves his hands and stammers that he did not mean cute in a sussy way, but rather that she is energetic like a wild animal. Fortunately for this bumbling idiot, she bursts into a fit of giggles, admitting that it has been a very long time since anyone called her cute and that it actually made her feel quite nice, playfully teasing him that he is the one who is actually cuter. Relieved that she took it so well, Seung starts to wonder if he should take a leap of faith and invite her out for a meal afterward. However, she suddenly checks her phone and gasps, warning him that they are going to be late and urging him to hurry as she exits the car, leaving him to follow her with a sigh. The two of them make their way into the bustling department store, riding the escalator up together. Seung notices his sister-in-law scanning the crowd anxiously, wondering exactly who she is searching for so intensely. Her face lights up as she spots a woman in purple workout gear waving at them from a distance. As they approach, his sister-in-law introduces the newcomer as Lena, who warmly introduces herself to Seung as Yurina, the yoga teacher. His sister-in-law happily explains that Yurina had always expressed a strong desire to meet Seung whenever his name came up, which is the sole reason she begged him to come along today. Seung quietly looks at Yurina, realizing that he has actually seen her around once in a while. Before Seung can even process the introduction, his sister-in-law abruptly waves goodbye, cheerfully announcing that she needs to go somewhere else for a little while, and leaving the two of them alone. Standing there in awkward silence, the truth of the situation finally dawns on Seung, as he realizes that, no matter how he tries to sugarcoat it, his sister-in-law brought him here on a blind date to introduce him to the yoga teacher. He stands there in silent disappointment, realizing that she simply wants him to find someone else and become independent soon, before Yurina politely breaks the silence by addressing him. Snapping out of his deep, disappointing thoughts with a sudden start, Seung quickly tries to collect himself and focus on his companion. Leaning in, the yoga teacher peers directly into his eyes, curious about what has been on his mind and wondering why he is suddenly making such a dark, brooding expression. This idiot can only stand there in silence, highly flustered by how closely she is standing in front of him. Yurina smiles sympathetically, concluding that he must be having an incredibly difficult and exhausting time lately. Scratching his head sheepishly, Seung lets out a nervous, self-deprecating laugh, readily admitting that she is absolutely right about his stress. Gazing up at him with a warm and playful expression, the yoga teacher then sweetens her sympathetic attitude by asking if she should use a little comforting exercise to help ease his tension and relieve his exhaustion. Later, as the other students wrap up their session and prepare to head home, Seung arrives at the quiet yoga studio. He slides the wooden door open and politely peeks his head inside, asking if the instructor, Yurina, is currently available. Turning away from her phone with a bright smile, Yurina welcomes him warmly, noting that he has arrived at the absolute perfect time. She instructs Seung to change into his workout gear, which instantly makes this hopeless dummy blush as he gets a close-up look at her tight athletic outfit. As he heads to change, Seung's sweat drops, realizing that his earlier wild daydreams were completely ridiculous and that she was only talking about a standard, hands-on yoga stretch when she offered to touch him. A few minutes later, Seung is lying flat on a blue yoga mat, trembling and groaning in agony as he attempts a deep forward fold. Yurina gently instructs him to slowly exhale, climbing onto his back to press down on his hips and urging him to hold the painful position just a little longer. In this incredibly bent-over position, the physical strain is so intense that Seung's mind goes completely blank, leading him to conclude that yoga is infinitely harder than he originally anticipated, though he admits the deep stretch is highly effective. Sitting up and panting heavily, Seung is caught completely off guard when Yurina stands beside him and suggests that they try big bad yoga next. He looks up in surprise, but she points out that practicing together is far less boring than exercising all by himself. Following her directions, Seung nervously positions himself directly in front of her. Yurina performs a wide leg split on the mat and instructs him to place his hands firmly on her hands while using his knees to press down on her hips to assist her with the deep stretch. He gingerly places his hands on her legs, silently wondering if he is doing this correctly as she praises his positioning. She then instructs him to tilt his upper body forward, put strength into his muscles, and hold the pose. Seung is completely flustered by the sudden, intense strains, silently questioning if normal yoga is always this sussy, but he dutifully complies by grasping her thighs and slowly tilting his weight forward as she lies flat on her back. The physical effort is so exhausting that Seung's body shakes violently, and he internally complains about how incredibly tiring this exercise is. As he struggles to hold himself up over her, she smiles warmly and lets out a relaxed sigh. Suddenly, Yurina wraps her legs tightly around Seung's hands, locking her ankles behind his back to pull him down. Seung gasps in utter shock, frantically asking what on earth she is doing to him. Yurina simply giggles, playfully admitting that she is just teaching him because her hardworking student looks so adorable trying his best. Seung continues to tremble under the sudden pressure, panicking that applying weight like this is making it impossible for him to maintain his balance. As Seung maintains his precarious balance over Yurina, the physical strain of the intense yoga stretch becomes far too tight, and their bodies end up making sweats. Yurina gasps in mild surprise at the sudden collision, while Seung sweats profusely, completely frozen in utter mortification. This clueless idiot instantly despairs, realizing his reputation is completely ruined and lamenting that he is about to be branded a total disgrace simply because his body had an uncontrollable response to the rigorous exercise. Looking down at her with a red, apologetic face, Seung quietly asks why she would choose to play such a sussy and suggestive prank, especially on someone she barely even knows. Yurina only smiles warmly, placing her hand gently on his side and revealing that she actually knows him quite well because she often watched him as he walked past her studio. Seung has a brief realization, recalling the moments he had looked up from his book at the store and noticed her walking by on the street outside. Yurina confesses that she had always felt mysteriously drawn toward him, and by pure coincidence, she discovered his identity while chatting with one of her yoga members, who turned out to be Seung's very own sister-in-law. Armed with this knowledge, she had eagerly requested the introduction, leaving Seung completely stunned as he finally understood the true story behind their meeting. Back in the present, Yurina reaches out to comfort him, gently telling him to put aside his embarrassment and follow his true feelings rather than holding back. Seung, highly flustered and struggling to maintain his composure, warns her that she might end up regretting her reckless actions later. Looking up at him with absolute confidence, the yoga teacher asks what on earth she would possibly regret, warmly reassuring him that this calorie-burning session is exactly what she wants. Night has fallen over the two-story brick house, and inside, Sejun lies wide awake in bed with his wife Yeonhee, resting her head against his shoulder. He cannot help but grumble about his younger brother Seung, wondering if the idiot is out seeing someone since he is never usually late, yet has still not returned home tonight. Noticing her husband's restlessness, Yeonhee shifts in bed and listens as Sejun asks if she has received any messages from Seung. Feeling a bit startled, she quickly denies hearing anything, though her thoughts immediately drift to her brother-in-law. Leaning over Sejun, she gently suggests that Seung should really find a partner and get married soon. Sejun lazily looks up, simply muttering a brief inquiry about whether that is truly the case, which Yeonhee softly confirms. Seeing an opportunity with Seung away from the house, Yeonhee grows playful and reminds her husband that they are completely alone. Sejun, acting like a bit of a dense dummy, wonders why his brother's absence matters, prompting Yeonhee to blushingly declare that this is their perfect chance to try fat-burning cardio. Sejun remains silent for a moment, looking quite overwhelmed as his wife eagerly waits for his response. With a heavy sigh, Sejun finally sits up and holds her hand, telling her that he agrees and instructing her to wear exercise clothes. However, the poor woman's hopes are immediately shattered when her exhausted husband instantly falls flat on his back, snoring loudly and drifting into a deep sleep before fat-burning cardio can even start. Left completely rejected and frustrated, Yeonhee can only sit in the quiet room with tears welling up in her eyes, utterly disappointed by her husband's complete lack of endurance. Later that night, under the starry sky, footsteps echo outside the gate as Seung finally makes his way back to the house. He reflects on how late it has gotten, realizing he lost track of time because he was busy having fun and sharing drinks with the yoga teacher, Yurina. Slipping quietly through the front door, our clueless monkey wonders if his older brother is already asleep, only to notice a soft light glowing down the hallway. Realizing someone is still awake despite the late hour, Seung cautiously creeps into the dining area to investigate. He freezes in absolute surprise upon stepping into the kitchen, finding his sister-in-law slumped over the table, seemingly passed out after drinking a bottle of soju all by herself. She lets out a heavy sigh as she sleeps, completely unaware of her brother-in-law's presence. Seyoung quickly covers his mouth against the strong smell of alcohol, deeply confused as to why his sister-in-law would be drinking so heavily when she normally avoids alcohol entirely, and he wonders if something bad has happened to her. As he looks down at her deep slumber, his inner idiot briefly takes over, and he finds his eyes wandering to her form as he experiences a sudden, highly sussy desire to do endurance training with her. Realizing what a total creep he is, Seyoung forcefully shakes his head and berates himself, wondering what on earth he is thinking, and concluding that he must be losing his mind. Deciding to act like a sensible person instead of a lovesick monkey, Seyoung gently shakes her shoulder and calls out to her, urging her to wake up before she catches a cold, sleeping in the drafty dining room. Yeonhee groans softly in response, slowly opening her eyes to look up at him with a flushed, heavily intoxicated expression. In that brief moment, our idiot is completely struck by her beauty, silently realizing that she looks far more attractive than the yoga teacher, Yurina. However, the heavily drunk woman blurs her vision and mistakes him for her husband, softly calling him by his brother's name. Seyoung freezes in absolute shock, realizing she must be so drunk that she is mistaking him for Sejun, and he quickly blushes as he tries to correct her by stating that he is not his older brother. Before he can step away, Yeonhee suddenly grabs his wrists in a tight grip and pulls him, pleadingly asking if they can continue fat-burning cardio like they were doing before. Seyoung's mind completely breaks into confusion as he wonders what on earth she could possibly be talking about, especially when she sleepily mentions that she was not left very satisfied. Realizing just how incredibly drunk his sister-in-law is, Seyoung gasps in shock as she suddenly pulls him down into an unexpected, sussy moment. His eyes widen in sheer horror at the sudden scene, and he desperately concludes that they absolutely cannot go any further than this. After she pulls back and sleepily mutters her husband's name once more, Seyoung seizes the opportunity to escape. Retreating like a total coward, he flees the kitchen and rushes straight to his room, slamming the door shut to hide in the safety of the darkness. The next morning, bright sunshine pours through the bedroom window, but Seyoung lies flat on his back, staring blankly at the ceiling after failing to get a single wink of sleep all night. Sitting up in bed with a heavy sigh, his hyperactive mind keeps replaying the sussy scene from the night before, leaving him holding his head in utter despair as he wonders how he can possibly look his sister-in-law in the face ever again. Hearing soft footsteps on the stairs, his anxiety spikes as he nervously worries about whether she will actually remember the embarrassing events of last night. Gingerly walking down the stairs to face his fate, Seyoung is suddenly startled to see his older brother, Sejun, entering through the front door with his briefcase. Seyoung calls out to him, but his guilty conscience immediately makes him panic, wondering if his brother somehow knows about the chaotic scene. However, Sejun simply lets out a tired sigh and casually mentions that Yeonhee is currently out cold upstairs, leaving Seyoung relieved but still deeply stressed by the dramatic night. Standing in the hallway, Seyoung feels a massive wave of relief wash over him as his older brother, Sejun, mutters that he has absolutely no idea why his wife drank so much last night. Entirely oblivious to the chaotic event that took place, Sejun casually tells Seyoung to make his own breakfast and get ready to head out to the bookstore soon. Seyoung quickly bids him a good day, watching his brother leave before reflecting on how deeply asleep Yeonhee must be after her intense drinking session. Just as he is contemplating last night's events, a faint groan of pain echoes from his sister-in-law's bedroom, immediately catching his attention. Curiosity and concern getting the better of him, Seyoung walks over to her door, giving it a polite knock before announcing his entry and stepping inside. He finds Yeonhee sitting up in bed, weakly holding her head and complaining about a painful headache. Calling out to her gently, Seyoung is momentarily paralyzed by her appearance, feeling his heart race all over again. Yeonhee slowly looks up, surprised to see her brother-in-law standing there. Seyoung explains that he heard about her heavy drinking from his brother, prompting her to sheepishly chuckle and admit that she is feeling quite dizzy, though she reassures him that it is merely a minor hangover. As she sweetly thanks him for worrying about her, Seyoung has a sudden realization when he notices her completely calm demeanor. He deduces that she has absolutely no memory of their sussy scene from the night before, and a light bulb practically goes off in his head. Relieved by this lucky turn of events, Seyoung tells her to wait a moment and runs off, returning shortly after to present her with a warm mug. Yeonhee curiously asks if the drink is honey water, to which Seyoung explains that he drinks it every time he consumes alcohol because it is incredibly effective for curing hangovers. Smiling warmly, he bids her goodbye and announces that he is finally heading off to work. Left alone in her bed, Yeonhee takes a gentle sip of the warm drink, quietly noting how incredibly sweet it tastes.